By November 1944, the Hurtgen Forest had already earned its reputation as one of the most punishing battlegrounds American soldiers would ever face. Stretching across the German-Belgian border, the forest was thick, tangled, and unforgiving. The trees grew so densely that sunlight barely reached the ground. Visibility was limited to meters, not yards. The soil was soaked with days of cold rain. Fog hung low in the mornings and refused to lift. Even veterans described the place as a green hell where danger blended into every shadow. For the U.S. Army, the mission seemed straightforward on paper. Push through the forest, seize the high ground, and prevent German forces from counterattacking into the advancing Allied flank. In reality, the forest nullified nearly every advantage the Americans possessed. Tanks could barely move. Artillery was unreliable. Tree bursts sent shrapnel raining down from above. Communications lines were cut constantly. Squads advanced blind, often unaware of the enemy, until the first shot was already fired. In this harsh environment, German defenders used every inch of terrain to their benefit. They were seasoned soldiers from the Wehrmacht and Fallschirmjäger units, men trained for defensive warfare. They knew the ground. They knew the ridgelines, the hidden trails, the ravines where American troops would naturally funnel. Their positions were camouflaged into the landscape, practically invisible until it was too late. Among the most dangerous elements the Germans deployed were Scharfschützen, snipers. These men were patient, disciplined, and lethal. Hurtgen was an ideal environment for their craft. The forest gave them concealment. The fog masked their movement. They needed only a rifle barrel's width of visibility to kill. American units were repeatedly pinned down by sniper fire they could neither locate nor suppress. One shot would come out of the trees. Then, nothing. Silence. No muzzle flash. No follow-up. Just the overwhelming knowledge that a hidden enemy was watching. The American 4th Infantry Division, advancing steadily deeper into the woods, learned this quickly. Their progress depended on locating and neutralizing snipers who turned every clearing into a death trap. Patrols were sent ahead to probe suspicious areas. Scouts moved silently, scanning for movement, glint, or anything out of place. Sometimes they found clues. Sometimes they didn't. And sometimes, as happened on November 18th, the sniper simply fired first. On that day, the platoon had been moving toward a known German defensive line marked by interlocking machine gun positions and camouflaged foxholes. The terrain sloped gently downward before rising into a shallow crest, a natural killing ground if defenders were waiting. The Americans knew this, but they had no choice but to advance. The Point Scout was the first to cross the low ridge. He raised his hand to signal the next movement. The shot came instantly. A Karabiner 98K, modified with a ZF-39 scope, fired from somewhere ahead. Silent, precise, deadly. The scout dropped before anyone even processed the sound. For a moment, the platoon hesitated, breath locked in their throats. They had fallen into the invisible web of German defensive doctrine. A sniper had sighted them long before they sighted him. Only a counter-sniper could break the stalemate. The American marksman who slid into cover that morning was not an inexperienced replacement, but a seasoned rifleman trained to deal with threats like this. He had spent weeks navigating the forest's shifting dangers. He knew the German preference for hiding in root systems, beneath fallen trees, inside shadowed openings carved into slopes. He also knew that once a German sniper fired his first shot, he rarely moved immediately. The shooter would wait for another opportunity, confident in his concealment. The platoon depended on him now, but before he could take his shot, he needed to understand the broader situation unfolding around them. a situation shaped by weeks of brutal fighting. And that wider context set the stage for the duel about to unfold. The deeper the Americans pushed into the Hurtgen, the clearer it became that this was not a battle of sweeping maneuvers or armored thrusts. It was a battle of feet, inches, and shadows. Every movement forward required painstaking effort. Every ridge, every bend in a forest trail, every cluster of trees might conceal a German defensive position. Units advanced until the crack of a rifle or the rattle of a machine gun proved they had gone too far. Then they froze, found cover, and tried to locate an enemy they could not see. In these conditions, snipers became force multipliers. German Scharfschützen were trained to fire from concealed positions that blended seamlessly into the forest. Many created small firing loopholes in tree trunks or earthen berms, holes no wider than a fist. From these, they could observe American movement for hours without being detected. Their rifles were zeroed precisely. Their patience was unmatched. They waited for moments of vulnerability. A soldier rising from a crouch, a medic leaning over the wounded, a radio operator adjusting his antenna. The Germans defending Hurtgen belonged to battle-hardened units, familiar with the terrain. Their snipers often occupied positions chosen weeks or months earlier. They memorized fields of fire. They mapped out likely American approach routes. When an American platoon entered their invisible domain, the Germans already had firing solutions ready. For the Americans, countering this threat required a different mindset. Snipers were not simply sharpshooters. They were problem solvers operating within a small window of opportunity. They needed to identify subtle signs. The unnatural straightness of a branch that hid a rifle barrel. The darkened knothole that might be a firing slit. The faint glimmer of glass reflecting from a scope lens. In the fog and dim light of Hurtgen, even these clues were rare. The American marksmen in this platoon carried an M1903A4 Springfield, the standard U.S. sniper rifle at the time. It was a bolt-action weapon with a 4-power scope, less magnification than many German optics, but capable of delivering accurate fire if the shooter understood the environment. He had used it long enough to know its limitations and its strengths. He trusted its stability, its reliability, and the familiar recoil that nudged into his shoulder with each shot. Over previous days, his platoon had encountered several German snipers. In most cases, the enemy fired and withdrew before they could be tracked. But on November 18th, this shooter stayed in place after his first kill. A mistake or a sign of confidence? The German likely believed his position was well concealed enough that the Americans would not find him before he fired again. Around him, the battlefield was shaped by more than just snipers. German machine gun teams were positioned deeper in the forest, ready to open fire if the Americans tried to rush forward recklessly. Mortar crews were hidden along reverse slopes, ready to drop shells onto any concentration of troops. The entire system depended on early detection, and snipers were the eyes and trigger of that system. This is why the American platoon halted completely after the first shot. They knew rushing into unknown ground was suicidal, but remaining still too long was equally dangerous. Every minute increased the odds that the German would fire again. The American sniper understood this delicate balance. He moved low, keeping his silhouette hidden. He studied the forward tree line through his scope, checking every dark corner, every root system, every depression in the earth. He had learned to look not for the sniper himself, but for the environment around him. A German marksman firing from a loophole typically left tiny signs: disturbed soil, a slight darkening around the opening, a faint muzzle shadow when the light shifted. He also knew that German snipers often worked alone, but communicated indirectly with nearby infantry units. If he failed to neutralize the threat quickly, The platoon might soon face coordinated fire from rifles, machine guns, or grenades. The entire forest was wired for defensive synergy. Every soldier around him was waiting. Every second was a silent test of nerve. And as he scanned the ridge ahead, a shape finally caught his attention. Small, dark, and motionless. It was the subtle clue he needed, the narrow opening where the German had fired his first shot. The duel was about to begin. The human angle. What it felt like in the Hurtgen. Fear in the Hurtgen forest was not loud. It was quiet, suffocating, and constant. Every soldier who entered those dark woods spoke of the same sensation, the feeling that someone was always watching. The trees pressed in from every side, tall and skeletal, their trunks forming endless rows of cover for an unseen enemy. The air was cold enough to sting the lungs. The forest floor was soft with layers of wet needles and mud. Even footsteps sounded muffled, swallowed by the oppressive silence. Men learned to keep their voices low, to gesture instead of speaking, to move with deliberate care. The enemy did the same. That was the terrifying part. Both sides were silent hunters walking the same ground. When the German sniper fired his opening shot that morning, it didn't break the silence. It amplified it. The platoon felt the shock wave of fear in their chests. No one knew who would be next. No one knew where the hidden rifle lay. For the American marksman, the emotional landscape was different. Snipers were trained to detach themselves from the immediate human panic. The platoon shook with anxiety. He steadied his breathing. While others tried to make themselves small, he crawled toward the threat. The weight of responsibility settled on him quickly and without drama. He wasn't thinking about heroism or glory. He was thinking about angles, light, distance, and the single opening that would appear for only a fraction of a second. In Hurtgen, survival required calm, and calm belonged to the man who could return fire with precision when everyone else froze. The tactical angle, how a sniper duel really works. A sniper duel is unlike any other combat engagement. It is not a contest of speed. It is a contest of patience, observation, and restraint. The German sniper had already revealed one critical piece of information with his first shot, the approximate direction of his position. That was enough to begin narrowing down possibilities, but not enough to fire back safely. If the American marksman rushed the shot, he risked hitting nothing but bark. The tactical challenge was immense. In a dense forest like Hurtgen, sound bounced unpredictably. Muzzle flash was invisible. Distances were distorted by fog and trees. Every tree trunk looked like a potential threat. But the German gave the American one advantage. He stayed in place. Most snipers relocated after their first shot. This one didn't. Perhaps he felt secure. Perhaps he wanted a second kill. Either way, he provided a fixed point from which a counter-sniper could work. The American moved slowly, always keeping low, testing sight lines through the brush. His M1903A4 lacked the power of German optics, so he compensated with experience. He studied the terrain the way a hunter studies a wind direction. Where would a German choose to hide? Which depression in the earth gave the widest field of fire? Which slope gave a clean angle on the scout? He mapped these possibilities silently in his mind. Then came the decisive detail, a small, unnatural shadow at the base of a tree. A firing slit, perfectly aligned with where the scout had fallen. The American knew this was his window. He didn't need to see the sniper. He only needed to see where the sniper's eye would reappear. A duel is not won by rushing. It is won by waiting for the moment the enemy believes he is safe enough to kill again. The German perspective. Confidence in concealment. To understand the duel fully, we must view it through the eyes of the German Scharfschütze. He was not a random rifleman. He was trained, experienced, and likely familiar with the Hurtgen terrain long before the Americans entered it. German snipers in 1944 were chosen for patience and precision. They studied camouflage techniques meticulously. They built their hides into the earth, weaving branches and soil into the structure until it became nearly indistinguishable from the forest around it. This sniper's position reflected that discipline. He had chosen a subtle depression beneath a tree root cluster. It gave him shelter, a stable firing platform, and an excellent view of the approach route. His rifle, the Kar 98K with a ZF-39 scope, was zeroed for the exact range he expected the Americans to appear. His opening shot proved his calculation. 1 round, 1 kill. Clean. Controlled. He likely expected the rest of the platoon to scatter into cover, buying him more time to attack again. In his mindset, he held the advantage. American troops were exposed. He was invisible. The forest was German territory, fortified, familiar, and deadly. A second shot could come whenever he chose. The sniper understood that every minute the platoon remained pinned increased the likelihood of a broader German engagement. Machine guns deeper in the forest could activate. Mortars could drop rounds on the stalled Americans. His goal was not simply to kill, it was to disrupt the American advance entirely. But his confidence had a flaw. He did not expect a counter-sniper of equal patience and skill. He believed his concealment absolute. He believed he was unseen. And that belief set the stage for the single American shot that would end the entire fight. The technological angle, rifle versus rifle. The duel in Hurtgen was not only a contest of patience, it was a clash of two of the most respected sniper rifles of the era. The German Scharfschütze fired a Karabiner 98K, fitted with a ZF-39 scope. It was a bolt-action rifle with exceptional accuracy, renowned for its reliability. German optics were finely crafted, offering sharp clarity even in dim forest light. The sniper likely adjusted his elevation for the short engagement distance typical of Hurtgen, somewhere between 80 and 150 meters. Opposing him, the American marksman carried the M1903A4 Springfield. Also a bolt-action rifle, the M1903A4 featured the M73 or M81 scope with 2.5x to 4x magnification depending on the model. Its optics were less powerful than German scopes, and the reticle was simpler, but American doctrine compensated with training that emphasized steady trigger squeeze, breath control, and environmental reading, skills that mattered more than magnification in a forest where visibility was never guaranteed. The external conditions made precision even harder. Fog softened outlines and shifted depth perception. Moisture clung to glass. Cold temperatures stiffened rifle actions and numbed fingers. Under these circumstances, the mechanical differences between rifles mattered. But the shooter behind the weapon mattered far more. The German sniper believed his rifle and concealment gave him complete control of the engagement. But the American marksman understood his rifle intimately. He knew how far he could push it. He knew the exact point where the reticle settled cleanly over a target. He knew how the bullet would travel through cold, heavy air. Steel and optics gave both sides the tools. Experience and steadiness gave only one shooter the advantage when the moment finally came. Leadership and doctrine. How training created the moment. The outcome of the duel was shaped not just by rifles or terrain, it was shaped by doctrine. German sniper training emphasized concealment, patience, and psychological impact. The Scharfschütze was taught to fire at key personnel first: scouts, officers, radio men. Kill the eyes and communication, and the rest of the platoon would stagnate. Firing first was a deliberate act designed to create paralysis. American doctrine, especially after early lessons in North Africa and Italy, shifted heavily toward counter-sniper tactics. Manuals instructed American riflemen to identify likely sniper hides, maintain spacing, and stay calm under sudden fire. Snipers were taught to read terrain intuitively and to resist the urge to fire prematurely. They trained to locate firing positions based on angles, not sound, a skill essential in the echoing confines of a forest. Leadership also played a role. The platoon leader did not panic after the point man fell. He ordered his men to stay low, maintain cover, and let the marksman work. Good officers understood that emotional reactions got soldiers killed. In the Hurtgen, leaders relied heavily on their sharpshooters to break exactly this kind of stalemate. The American sniper had absorbed this doctrine. His training told him not to rush, not to fire through panic, not to guess. He knew the German had fired first. He knew the next move belonged to him. And he understood that a single, accurate bullet could shift the momentum not only of his platoon's advance, but the entire tactical situation unfolding along that ridge. Training gave him the discipline to wait for the one opening that would soon appear, a moment the German believed he controlled. The moral and psychological angle. The weight of one shot. Combat in the Hurtgen forest was deeply psychological. Soldiers described it as fighting ghosts, enemies who struck from nowhere and vanished instantly. A sniper duel heightened that tension to its extreme. Two men, unseen by each other, sharing the same silence, the same patience, the same deadly focus. Both understood the consequences of their actions. Both knew the other was watching. For the German sniper, the engagement was a calculated strike. He had fired his first shot with confidence. He had watched the scout fall. He felt the fleeting advantage that comes from surprise, but he also knew unseen eyes would soon search for him. Snipers accepted their role with grim realism. Once you fired, you became a target. For the American marksman, the emotional pressure was different. He watched a fellow soldier die. He felt the platoon's fear ripple outward. He knew that if he failed, if he misjudged the distance or hesitated, the German would fire again. Sniper duels carry a unique moral weight. They require a shooter to focus not on a massed enemy line, but on a single human being. The battle becomes intensely personal. And yet, morality in war is often compressed into instinct. The American sniper did not have the luxury of reflection in that moment. He had to detach, to silence every thought except the mechanics of the shot. Breath, sight picture, trigger pressure. When he finally lined up the reticle over the loophole, he knew what the next squeeze of the trigger meant. He also knew it would end the danger for his platoon. The forests of Hurtgen allowed no room for hesitation. The shot he prepared himself to take carried both the burden of necessity and the weight of finality. And in that pressing silence, the duel reached its inevitable turning point. The forest went still after the first shot. Not quiet, still. A different kind of silence. Heavy. Watching. The kind that made every man feel as if the trees themselves were drawing breath. The American platoon hugged the ground, eyes wide, hearts hammering inside thick winter jackets. The body of the scout lay motionless ahead of them, half submerged in mud and pine needles. No one dared move forward to pull him back. The German sniper was waiting for exactly that. The American marksman slid behind a fallen tree trunk, flat, steady, and thick enough to stop a 7.92 mm round. He adjusted his elbows, tucked his knees in, and pressed his cheek against the cold stock of the M1903A4. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He didn't look at the others. In a sniper duel, the world narrowed into a single line between him and the man who had just fired. He replayed the shot in his mind, the sound, the angle, the impact location on the scout's helmet, the way the body fell. All of it told a story. The German had fired from slightly above, not level ground. The bullet entered at a downward angle. That meant the sniper was positioned on the slope ahead, somewhere near the base of the tree line. But exactly where? He scanned slowly, deliberately. Impatience was death in Hurtgen. The forest distorted vision. The fog blurred depth. Even the smallest movement could be a trick of the wind. Still, the American knew how to search. He ignored the trees themselves and studied between them. German snipers favored natural depressions, root systems, small berms, folds in the ground that created concealment. A few areas stood out. Shadows too dense, shapes too straight. Then he saw it. A tiny, unnatural dark spot near the base of an uprooted tree. Circular, evenly edged, too perfect to be natural. It was a firing loophole, no wider than 2 fingers, invisible to most, but not to a trained eye looking for it. He exhaled slowly. "I've got him," he whispered, not loudly, but enough for the nearest soldier to hear. The platoon leader nodded from behind cover. He trusted the marksman completely. No further orders were needed. The duel was now in one man's hands. The American centered the reticle on the loophole, but he didn't fire. The German sniper wasn't exposed, only the barrel and the tiniest hint of shadow. Hitting that opening with certainty required a precise moment. When the German moved to fire again, the marksman settled deeper into the mud, steadying his breathing. The world shrank to heartbeat, fog, and the faint black circle ahead. Minutes passed, long, suffocating minutes. Soldiers remained motionless, hardly daring to breathe. The German sniper stayed silent as well, knowing Americans often revealed themselves after the initial shock. He was patient. He was confident. He had done this before. The American rifleman shifted slightly, adjusting his elevation. The cold metal pressed against his cheekbone. His breath slowed until it matched the rise and fall of the forest fog. Then, a tiny glint appeared in the loophole, almost imperceptible. It was the sniper's scope lens, catching a faint bit of ambient light through the trees. A sign he was shifting for another shot. The American's finger moved to the trigger, not pulling, just resting, feeling the weight break, feeling the rifle settle perfectly into the pocket of his shoulder. The German began to move again, just a fraction, just enough to prepare his second shot, and that small motion changed everything. The American marksman knew this was his moment, the moment the German believed he still had control, the moment his face, or at least the slight edge of it, would move into the firing slit. The American inhaled once, held it, centered the reticle. His world was now only the loophole, only the breath, only the trigger, and the understanding that the next half-second would decide who walked out of the forest, and who never would. The marksman's breath hung in the cold air, suspended like a thin veil between him and the life he was about to end. His world tightened into a single point, the tiny circular opening beneath the tangle of roots across the slope. Nothing else existed. Not the cold, not the fear, not the weight of the platoon waiting behind him. Only the loophole, only the man behind it. Then it happened. A faint shadow shifted inside the opening. Subtle, human. The German sniper was leaning forward again, eye pressing closer to the scope, preparing his second shot. He believed he still owned the fight. He believed he retained the advantage that had given him his first kill. He believed his camouflage and training made him untouchable. But for the first time since firing that opening round, he was visible. Barely, but enough. The American sniper's finger tightened. The trigger met the first stage of pressure. His heartbeat slowed. Time stretched thin. He squeezed. The M1990-3A4 cracked sharply, the sound cutting through the forest like a blade. The recoil punched softly into his shoulder. The shot traveled cleanly across the short distance, slicing through drifting fog, entering the loophole with millimeter precision. There was no second shot from the German. Inside the hide, the round struck exactly where the American intended, center mass through the opening. The German's head snapped backward. His rifle clattered against the wooden support. A broken breath escaped his chest. The fight ended before he could even register surprise. The bullet had done its work instantly. But the duel was not finished. Not for the platoon. Everyone held their breath for several long seconds. Snipers often operated in pairs. A spotter, a backup rifleman, someone waiting for the counter-sniper to reveal himself. The Americans knew this. The marksman kept his rifle trained on the loophole, unwilling to assume victory until he saw confirmation. The forest listened, silent and heavy. Then a small collapse came, a shift of loose earth inside the German hide. A limp arm slid partially into view. No movement, no drag of breath, no sound of a scope shifting or a bolt sliding home. It was over. The platoon leader lifted one hand in a slow, cautious signal. Advance. But carefully. No cheers, no relief. Not yet. Hürtgen punished anyone who assumed safety too quickly. The fire team swept forward, moving low, flanking from the sides, avoiding the sniper's direct line. The marksman remained behind his fallen log, rifle still locked on the hiding spot, covering the approach. When the first Americans reached the sniper's position, they found exactly what the shooter had expected. A perfectly camouflaged firing pit built into the slope, reinforced with logs, roots, and soil. A narrow tunnel ran back behind the loophole, barely wider than a man's shoulders. Inside, the German sniper lay slumped over his rifle, one gloved hand still wrapped loosely around the stock. His Kar 98K was loaded for another shot that would never come. His face was calm, eyes half closed, caught in a final moment of focus. There was no spotter, no second rifle. He had been operating alone, confident enough to hold the ridge by himself. The Americans studied the hide, realizing how close they had come to disaster. From that position, the sniper had a perfect angle on the platoon's advance route. If the American counter-sniper had been slower, or less precise, or less calm, several more soldiers would have died. The platoon would have been pinned. Germans deeper in the forest might have opened up with machine guns. Mortars might have bracketed the area. One man had held their fate in his hands. As the forward team secured the hide, the marksman finally rose from behind the log. He lifted his rifle, checked the chamber, and moved forward with quiet steps. Not proud, not triumphant, just steady. He approached the slope, confirmed the kill with his own eyes, then scanned the surrounding tree line for any remaining threats. Only after a full minute of silence did the platoon exhale as a group, a long collective release of tension. The danger had passed. The duel was finished. The marksman would remember it clearly for the rest of his life. One shot answering another. Two men, strangers until their rifles connected them across 100 yards of wet forest. One fired first. The other ended the fight. The platoon regrouped, lifted their fallen scout, and moved onward into the forest. The trees swallowed their shapes. The fog closed behind them. The battle continued elsewhere. But that small ridge, that quiet exchange of two shots, changed their advance for the day. It saved lives. It allowed them to break through one more layer of Germany's hidden defenses. And it reminded everyone in the Hurtgen that survival depended on calm hands, clear eyes, and a single decision made at the perfect moment. When the platoon resumed its advance, the weight of what had just happened settled slowly across the men. Combat in the Hurtgen forest rarely offered clarity. Soldiers often fought enemies they never saw, absorbed fire from invisible positions, and moved through terrain that seemed determined to kill them even without German intervention. But in this moment, one sniper firing, one sniper falling, they understood the exact cause and effect. One man in their unit had neutralized the threat that had halted their movement and would have certainly killed more of them. The forest did not change. The fog still clung to the trees. The bitter wind still pressed through their jackets. But the psychological landscape shifted. A sense of immediate danger had lifted, replaced by the quiet momentum of survival. The platoon leader allowed the men a brief pause behind the next ridge to reorganize. Rifles were checked. Ammunition redistributed. A medic covered the fallen scout's face and placed him gently on a litter. There was no time for ceremony. Only a few seconds of silence. During the pause, several soldiers approached the marksman, not with loud gratitude, but with the subdued acknowledgement common among frontline troops. A nod, a pat on the shoulder, a simple, "Good shot." They all knew what could have happened had he missed or hesitated. In the Hurtgen, a single accurate round could influence the next hour of fighting, sometimes the next day. The platoon's forward observers radioed back to the company command post, reporting the sniper threat had been neutralized. The message traveled upward through channels, first to battalion, then to regimental headquarters. These small engagements rarely made it into major after-action summaries. Hurtgen was filled with too many daily casualties, too many firefights, too many invisible duels like this one. But squad-level accounts were recorded by platoon leaders, and the elimination of a German sniper was always worth noting. Later, when engineers cleared the slope and mapped German positions in the area, they confirmed what the Americans already suspected. The sniper's hide had been part of a layered defensive line. Behind his position, deeper in the forest, were machine gun nests prepared to fire on the path the platoon intended to take. The sniper was the trigger, the first threat in a sequence designed to stall and break advancing American forces. His survival would have meant more casualties, more pinned-down units, and slower progress in a battle already marked by delays and heavy losses. The Americans also inspected the Germans' equipment. His Kar 98K rifle was finely maintained, its scope clear despite the moisture. 6 rounds remained in the magazine. A small ration tin lay beside him, along with a set of spare wool socks, a compact field kit, and a letter folded carefully in a breast pocket. The marksman who ended his life did not dwell on these belongings. Soldiers in the Hurtgen learned early not to let empathy cloud their judgment. But the presence of personal items was a stark reminder. The duel had been between two professionals, two human beings trapped inside one of the most unforgiving battles of the European war. As the platoon continued moving, they encountered more German resistance, more mines, more machine gun fire. The day unfolded into the same grinding struggle that defined every inch of the Hurtgen campaign. But they moved forward, not pinned, not stalled, not broken by a hidden shooter who might have dictated their entire day. The American marksman said little. He carried his rifle as he always did, scanning the tree line with the calm vigilance of someone who understood his role. He had ended the fight, but he knew another might begin at any moment. In the Hurtgen, victory was never final. It was simply survival, extended one more hour. But the platoon never forgot that morning. The silence, the first shot, and the single response that decided all that followed. As the days passed, the battle for the Hurtgen Forest continued without respite. The American 4th Infantry Division pressed forward, engaging in one of the bloodiest and most costly campaigns of the European theater. The dense woods, soaked earth and fog remained constant companions. Yet, the quiet victory of that single sniper duel stood out among the constant barrage of artillery, machine gun fire, and the relentless march of soldiers toward the German positions. In the larger picture of the Hurtgen campaign, the sniper duel was but a small event, a single fight in a battle that claimed thousands of lives on both sides. But for the soldiers who fought through the dense underbrush, it was a turning point in their advance. The elimination of the German sniper allowed the platoon to proceed without the looming fear of being picked off one by one. It gave them something invaluable: confidence. The tactical significance was clear. The American sniper's successful countermeasure against the German marksman was a testament to the growing effectiveness of U.S. counter-sniper training. The forest was still filled with danger, but the tactics employed that day became a small victory in a series of small wins for the American forces. German snipers, while deadly, could be neutralized by American riflemen trained in patience, observation, and the art of counter-sniping. The men in the platoon knew it, and it gave them a subtle edge for the next engagement. In the larger strategic picture, the American forces in the Hurtgen were still struggling to advance. The Germans had constructed elaborate defensive networks, from foxholes and machine gun positions to anti-tank obstacles and sniper nests. The terrain was against them. The dense forest gave the Germans numerous advantages, from concealment to the ability to launch quick ambushes and retreat into the thick canopy. But each successful counterattack, each sniper neutralized, was a step closer to breaking the German defensive line. While the platoon continued its advance through the woods, the story of that sniper duel spread quietly through the ranks. Word of an American marksman taking out a German sniper with a single shot wasn't the sort of victory that earned a medal, but it was the kind of moment that earned respect. Officers praised the precision and calm displayed by the sniper. He became an example of how individual actions, when executed with the right training and discipline, could change the course of a battle, no matter how small the engagement might seem. At higher levels, the significance of the duel didn't go unnoticed. Battalion and regimental reports mentioned the neutralization of sniper positions and the role of counter-snipers in increasing operational success. Sniper duels like the one fought in Hurtgen Forest were becoming more common as American training evolved to meet the increasing threat of German sharpshooters. The lessons learned here, in the shadow of the trees, would influence the tactics used by American snipers in later battles, from the battlefields of Normandy to the streets of Berlin. The psychological toll on the German defenders was evident. For them, the loss of a trained sniper, especially one who had been so effective in harassing American forces, was a significant blow. German snipers were highly valued by the Wehrmacht, and the loss of one could cause a ripple effect of doubt and frustration. The American counter-sniper, who was able to identify and eliminate the threat, contributed to this breakdown in morale. The psychological impact on the American platoon was equally profound. For the soldiers who had been pinned down, knowing that the German sniper could strike at any moment, the resolution of that threat was a weight lifted from their shoulders. They moved with renewed purpose. Their fear of the unseen enemy had been countered with the skill and discipline of their own marksmen. For these men, the war, even if only for a few moments, felt more winnable. Though the Hurtgen campaign continued for weeks, and the losses continued to mount, moments like this sniper duel helped fuel the larger narrative of American perseverance. In the thick woods of Hurtgen, where the enemy could be anywhere and everywhere, the American soldiers proved that precision, patience, and training could turn the tables. A single shot, when it mattered most, could tip the scales. The American marksman's action, while only one piece of the larger puzzle, became an enduring symbol for the men who fought alongside him. It reminded them that even in the harshest conditions, individual skill and resolve could make the difference between life and death. In the dark, frozen depths of the Hurtgen forest, the war became more than a battle between armies. It was a struggle for survival, where patience was as crucial as firepower. The sniper duel that unfolded on November 18, 1944, epitomized the silent, calculated violence that defined this brutal campaign. For the soldiers who fought in Hurtgen, every step forward was earned at the cost of extraordinary determination. The duel between the American and the German marksmen was not just a clash of rifles. It was a moment that captured the essence of warfare in these woods. Measured, tense, and decisive. The impact of that single shot reached far beyond the immediate firefight. It was a lesson in precision, discipline, and the psychology of combat. The American marksman, calm under pressure, knew that one misstep could mean the difference between victory and defeat for his platoon. His shot did not just eliminate a sniper. It neutralized a critical threat that had the potential to disrupt the entire American advance. In the chaos of war, such actions are often overlooked, but they are no less significant. One shot, fired with intention, could tip the balance, saving lives and shaping the course of a battle. For the German sniper, his defeat was a reminder of the uncertainty that all soldiers in the Hurtgen faced. Camouflage, training, and confidence could not protect him from the precise eye of the counter-sniper. In the forests of Hurtgen, even the best-laid plans could unravel in a single moment. The duel highlighted the fragile nature of combat, where the margin between life and death was razor-thin. Ultimately, the legacy of this encounter is not just in the technical aspects of the sniper's skill, but in the courage and focus it took to face an invisible enemy in an environment designed to disorient and destroy. It serves as a reminder that war is as much about the unseen battles as it is about the ones fought head-on. In the Hurtgen forest, where victory was measured inch by inch, the skill of a single marksman could turn the tide in a fight where every advantage was fleeting and every moment counted. In the end, this sniper duel in Hurtgen forest stands as a testament to the calm amidst chaos. A single calculated shot that altered the course of an entire engagement, proving that even in the darkest corners of war, skill and resolve could create the light needed to push through.